Welcome to You're All Doomed, the podcast where we chop our way through Friday the 13th, 13 minutes at a time. I'm your host, Brian.
And I'm Greg, and I'm not a very good swimmer.
This minute begins with Mrs. Voorhees talking about something and ends with Alice apparently in a hospital bed. When we last met Mrs. Voorhees, she was telling us about her son Jason drowning in the lake, and she also suggests that it's not a good idea to reopen this camp. And when we pick up here, she explains why it's not a good idea, and that's because, not after what happened to Jason, her sweet, sweet boy, she does acknowledge that it's her only child.
Yeah, she specifically mentions that he's her only child.
And then this is kind of where it becomes finally clear that she's batshit crazy when she starts accusing Alice of being the one responsible for letting him drown.
Right.
She starts screaming at him and, you should have paid attention to him. He wasn't a good swimmer. Look what you did. And then she just completely snaps and pulls out a knife and lunges at Alice.
While she's ranting a little bit, and we were seeing these hallucinatory flashbacks to Jason's drowning, and even hearing some of his yelling, we get a pretty good look, our first pretty good close-up look at young Jason as he's drowning. And there's definitely something odd about this kid. He's completely bald.
Yep.
Which is unusual for a child his age. And his features seem to be a little bit off kilter. So that was puzzling, to see from her mind's eye that her son was at least a different looking child. But yeah, so then she flips out and pulls out a knife. And
Alice decides to retaliate with, it looks like a fireplace tool of some sort.
Yeah, they kind of grapple a little bit, and then basically it seems like this chunk is just Pam getting her ass kicked time after time, and this is ass kicking number one with a fireplace poker, which I pose to you again: good weapon or not?
In that situation, it's probably fine. She needs something to just slow her down a little bit, and it's a metal rod, and so she picks it up and cracks her over the back with it. It
seems to
does
do
a
its job.
Good enough job. It knocks her down long enough that Alice is able to run out of the cabin, but she's not down for long. So
no, I mean, I feel like if Alice had had her wits about her, or if you and I were in this situation, despite being cowardly wusses, maybe use the poker then to hobble Mrs. Voorhees in the leg, poke her in the leg so that she can't pursue you as easily or something.
Or continue to hit her while she's down and make sure that she's down. But as in Alice's defense, yes, it's kind of clearly established at this point that Mrs. Voorhees is a little crazy, but I don't know if there's enough substantial evidence there that she could justify just beating the shit out of this old woman and potentially killing her. So I think she's probably fine with just knocking her down, slowing her, and her strategy seems to make sense, especially when we see what she does next, which she makes an attempt. She runs outside and gets into Mrs. Voorhees' Jeep, and she's like, well, I'm just going to drive away and then everything will be perfect, except there's someone in the passenger seat.
Yeah, I was really surprised by that this time. I guess I'd forgotten that Annie's corpse is sitting in the Jeep with her slit throat and her vacant expression. I was startled by that. I'd completely forgotten. And that was a nice moment.
I just love that Mrs. Voorhees has been driving around with Alice in the passenger seat the whole time, Weekend at Bernie's style. I wonder if she strapped
asking
him
her
in
directions.
with the seat. And we would just shut up. I know where I'm going.
I wonder if her seatbelt is buckled.
I don't know, but it would be great if people saw her on the road and were just waving to her, oh, I wonder who's in the car with
Voorhees
Pamela.
Lifts Annie's hand up and is waving at people, giving them the finger.
She's got this elaborate string mechanism set up where she's like a puppet.
Yeah, so that freaks Alice out quite a bit, and she then runs away from the Jeep, hightails it away from the Jeep.
Into the woods.
Where,
some reason,
out of nowhere, Steve Christie's corpse flops down from a tree.
Yeah, and I can't tell if that was planned. It almost seems like this is turning into a horror house. Or a haunted house thing where every corner you go around, something is triggered and a jump scare. But is this just convenient timing that his body plops down, or is this all part of a design that Mrs. Voorhees came up with?
I mean, there's no way it would be a staggering coincidence that it was just happened to, plop down from the tree as Alice was running toward it. It had to be some sort of tripwire mechanism or something. Though you would ask how Pam knew that Alice was going to run in that direction, or why she would concoct this little scare trap.
Well, not
thing.
to mention the fact, and we seem to be asking this question a lot for a lot of the, post-kill scenarios, is how did he get up there?
Yeah.
You've got people that are arrowed, pin cushioned to a door, and then you got people being thrown through a window. Now you've got someone up in a tree. That's probably the hardest of all of the ones we've seen. Like, how did he get up there and be able to prop him up in a way that he was able to swing down? It's almost like he's gripping with his legs, to remain, attached to the branch above him. And it seems pretty elaborate. And if it's deliberate, I just don't understand why it was done that way. There's other, like, why not put Steve in the driver's seat and just go for the full effect?
Make it look like they're making out.
or have him like sitting on the roof of the car, and like just something that just makes a little bit more sense than having him up in a tree.
Yeah, that smacked of something that was designed to scare the audience, not the character.
Yeah.
Specifically because, I mean, Steve's body is facing the camera, so Alice cannot see the injury to him or his face. She's seeing his back, and therefore is only assuming that it's him and dead.
It's just a guy in a raincoat.
It's just a guy in a raincoat. But this is confirmation that Steve Christy is dead.
Yep.
Played by Peter Brower, perhaps Brewer, I don't know. But he did some soap opera work. I'm assuming where he yelled at all of the other characters on the soap opera.
For not getting their shit done.
Yeah. And interestingly played an auctioneer in several projects, because apparently he does that in his spare time.
Yeah, I saw that too.
So he's probably still out there, maybe doing Antiques Roadshow with Mark L. Wahlberg.
Yeah, I can picture him at an auction, pointing at people. Bid more! You're not bidding enough.
Yeah,
what
right?
are you doing? You're not doing anything. Sit there. Come on, give me some more money.
Yeah, that seems right up his alley. So so farewell to Steve Christy.
Yep.
And then it appears that Mrs. Voorhees has regained consciousness.
And she's pissed. Really pissed. She kind of like storms out of the cabin, and she sees Alice running into the woods, and then she starts to. I guess we're supposed to assume that this is her channeling Jason, but she starts to to say in a voice that's very similar to the voice that Brenda heard earlier, which is, kill her, mommy, kill her. And she responds, in the affirmative, like, yeah, I'm going to, Jason, don't worry. So now she's having these conversations in her head, even when no one's around.
Yeah, clearly Jason has lived on in Pam's own mind. She's had some sort of mental fracture where she has this additional personality that she believes is her dead son, and she's having full-blown conversations. I have difficulty, we'll try not to try to avoid skipping ahead too much on anything, but I have difficulty picturing Jason ever talking.
Yeah.
So it's weird that she has this impression of him, and we even kind of hear him in her hallucinations, but I have difficulty ever imagining Jason using his voice, or being able to, frankly.
Well, maybe it's just Mrs. Voorhees' version of what Jason could have or should have been, the perfect child,
right?
And, just idolizing his mother, and she doing everything that he requests, and making her feel better as a mother, and then making him a better child in return. It's a strange. It's the only exchanges that we see, with Jason and his mother, or in these dream sequences. So we just have to kind of take her word for it that this is, something Jason would want, or is it just a convenient excuse that she's using to justify her actions? Like, oh no, Jason's telling me to do it. I'd love to see like an alternate cut where Jason's still flailing in the lake, and he's like, "No, mommy, what the fuck are you doing? Stop, stop." I'm fine. It's my own damn fault. I shouldn't have gone in the lake.
It's not that deep, Mommy. It's
Yeah,
just fine."
look, I'm standing. It's only a foot deep.
So then Alice runs into a shed of some kind,
Yeah,
or
a cabin maybe. I don't know.
the supply cabin or something. And Pam tracks her there, and I get a kick out of Alice's self-defense techniques here. She's got a gun, but instead of she's not able to find any ammunition right off the bat, and so instead of swinging at Pam with the gun or something, she basically bunts.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And kind of nudges Pam with this rifle, and then is reduced to grabbing anything within reach, and tosses a big spool of twine at Pam.
Yeah, and maybe a screwdriver,
or a roll of pennies or something.
Yeah, there's a bunch of things that she just starts throwing that are not going to be even remotely effective, but it's just like she's just scrambling at this point. But right before that, Mrs. Voorhees turns the generator back on. It's like no one can make up their mind what to do with this stupid generator. It's on, it's off. They turn it back on again. So she turns this back on, and I think she tries to reassure Alice that everything's going to be okay, and that it's going to be easier for her than it was for Jason. Maybe to suggest that she's going to dispatch of her quicker than Jason, who perhaps suffered while drowning.
That's an interesting point, and it brings up something that occurs to me. Pam is awfully chatty with Alice. I wonder, like, when Ned went into the cabin earlier, did he get this whole spiel too, or was he killed immediately? I mean, I wonder how many people Pam tells this story to before she unloads on them.
Yeah, it's a good point. Like it's a popular thing in movies where the final showdown often results in a lot of exposition of the nefarious plot. But yeah, why did she decide? I mean, I guess she knows that Alice is the last one, but what's the point of explaining the story to her if the plan is to kill Alice? Because it's not like she can go, make sure you tell my story to others so they know never to come back here. It's like she's going to tell her all this stuff and then kill her anyway. So what's the point?
Well, is she? Because, as soon as she finishes talking to Alice this time, she basically just starts slapping her around a little bit.
Yeah, well, that's true, because now she's like toying with her, which also I doubt she did with any of the other. We know she didn't do it with a lot of them. A lot of times she just walked up to them and stabbed them in the gut or slit their throat,
shot them in the balls with an arrow.
Right. So now it's just, she is like toying with her, and I don't know what the point is. If she's just prolonging it, because
is she savoring her victory because she, like as you say, Alice is the last one, and so she can draw this one out a little bit.
Maybe
and
like she knows she's
herself.
not going to be interrupted, and it's uncharacteristic compared to all of the other kills that we've seen her do so far, which are very quick and by surprise. And this is drawn out, and I'm sure it's done more for cinematic purposes to make it suspenseful, but it becomes a little comical.
Yeah,
because you do have scenes where they're slapping each other and throwing balls of twine, and it's like, what's
it's
going on?
It's such a de-escalation at the critical moment.
Yeah.
But then we have Pam's second ass kicking because Alice ratchets things back up by shoving the gun butt into Pam's vagina.
Yeah, good donkey punch,
and then smacking her with the gun butt in the face onto a pile of what appear to be very soiled mattresses.
Yeah.
Pam gets
Kevin Bacon was clearly there,
kind of hammered by the gun, and then again moments later with a frying pan to the face. She's just getting beat all over town.
That's why this has become comical, because it really is quite literally everything under the kitchen sink. Like, what can I hit her with next? Well, there's a frying pan, and there's a shovel, and then the end of the gun, and then I'm gonna slap you, and then it's becoming a little tedious.
It's becoming a little
let's
tedious.
get on. Like, no one seems to be really getting injured. It's just kind of postponing things.
Yeah, and Alice at one point hides in possibly the lamest closet ever. The door isn't even completely solid, and I'm sure that that as soon as Pam walks into that kitchen or room or whatever, she can hear Alice breathing or moving around in there. And
I do like it though. It does, because you can, especially when the lights turn on in the kitchen or whatever that's adjacent to, you start to see the movement in there, and like you know that she's not going to remain hidden, and so it's just a matter of time before Mrs. Voorhees finds her, and so it's and you can tell that the door is just very flimsy, and it's not going to provide any defense. And but I just like the kind of peering through the blinds aspect of things.
So after frying Pan into the face, Pam is knocked out again, and Alice runs outside.
The weird thing here is when Alice makes her way outside, she runs down to the lake, and kind of like for a moment of reflection, there's no, despite everything that just happened, she's just like, oh, I'm just going to catch my breath for a second if you don't mind, and sit right here. It's like, no, this is your opportunity to get the fuck out of there.
Get in the canoe and paddle out to the middle of the lake.
Go somewhere. Why would anyone do that?
Well, I mean, like, Pam can't get you out there.
That's true.
So, I mean, or at least paddle the other side of the lake or something.
Yeah. But I also don't understand why, just because Alice or Annie was in the front seat of the Jeep, why she couldn't take the Jeep.
Just jump in the Jeep.
You've seen some pretty horrible shit so far. It just,
suck it up and
close one of your eyes and put the other one on the road and just drive away. But I mean, we can also, that could have been easily solved by showing that Mrs. Voorhees has the keys or something. But that could have been an added element of the fight is, Alice knows that Mrs. Voorhees has the keys, so you got to knock her down, and then you get the keys from her, and then maybe get back to the Jeep. But yeah, instead she ends up at the lake shore, and she's just like, yeah, I'm just going to have a little sit.
Yeah, and then, of course, as you would expect, Pam shows up and goes after Annie again, and they even start taking swipes at each other with an oar that at one point gets snapped in half, and Annie comes very close to being impaled by the wrong end of an oar. Well,
it also gets chopped in half because doesn't Mrs. Voorhees have a machete now?
Oh, that's right, she does.
I don't know where it came from. Bill, at some point.
Bill gave it to her.
Bill was nice enough to lend it to her. But now suddenly the tide has turned. We've got oar versus machete, but Alice does a pretty good job of blocking one of the hits with the machete, and that's when the oar breaks.
It gets severed. I mean, it's a pretty good machete versus oar fight. And then it basically devolves into the two ladies wrestling on the ground in the sand.
Right.
With some pretty vicious, head pile drivers and stuff.
And Mrs. Voorhees bites Alice at one point.
And I think Alice bites her back.
Yeah.
I think it's just like, it's a full-on, I hate to say it, but cat fight. It's, hair pulling and biting, and it's pretty down and dirty.
I mean, at this point, has Mrs. Voorhees shown you anything that would prove that she is an unstoppable force, or has she simply succeeded in her killings because she's surprised people?
I think that she makes good use of the element of surprise, but she's also the things that she has done after killing these people have displayed real physical strength. I mean, like you say, hurling Brenda through the window or hoisting Steve up into the tree, that's got to take some upper body strength that, I'm guessing that she's pretty formidable when she's grappling with you. When she really buckles down, she can do some damage. So I give Alice a lot of credit for being able to withstand some of those punishing blows that they're trading.
Yeah, I feel like at first Mrs. Voorhees was probably just fucking with Alice and like, I'm gonna,
take her measure maybe.
Yeah, like, come on, you know how this is gonna end, but I'm just gonna slap you around a little bit. But then I think by the time they get down to the lake, I feel like that's when Mrs. Voorhees maybe starts to show some concern and think, I might actually be up against something here, because I think it's when she takes a swing with the machete and Alice blocks it with the oar that there's kind of like a sense of surprise on Mrs. Voorhees' face, like, oh shit, I wasn't expecting that. Like, I thought this was kind of going to be the end of things, but you're putting up a pretty serious fight here. So yeah, I think in the end, Mrs. Voorhees is probably a little bit overmatched, and that she has succeeded thus far just by the element of surprise. And she probably got a little overconfident
That
when she
could
got to
very well be,
Alice and
yeah.
knowing that she's alone, or this is the last one, and you're like, I'm just gonna mess around with a little bit, and then I'm gonna kill you, and then everything will be great again. And now she's starting to realize that maybe her plan isn't going to work out so well, and that maybe she should have just snuck up on Alice and taken care of her right away.
And so in the course of this struggle, Pam gets shoved away from Alice a bit, which gives Alice a moment in the fight to pick up an item that has fallen nearby. And
would it be a machete?
It would be a machete.
Hmm.
And Alice then becomes the attacker. She goes on the offensive. And we see a dawning look of horror on Mrs. Voorhees' face as Alice approaches and takes a mighty swing with that machete.
That's when I half expect, to hear the just guttural reaction of Mrs. Voorhees going, "Oh shit!" Yeah, as Alice takes this, slow motion swing that Ken Griffey Jr. would be envious of, and just winds up with everything she's got left in her, and she drops off Mrs. Voorhees' head.
It goes clean off.
Yeah, it's a pretty good shot, and as the head is tumbling through the air, we also see a Mrs. Voorhees' pair of hands kind of like reach up almost to her neck and kind of clench fists and
grasp at the air where her head had been.
The last last bit of energy, just like, no, I can't believe you did this, and then her body just kind of crumbles onto the sand.
It's a pretty darn good decapitation.
It's
great. I like how they filmed it. I like how they edited it. It doesn't, you never get a good enough look at the head to see that it's fake. Everything is processed in a way that makes it kind of blurry, and there's they undercrank the camera or something to give it a little bit of the image a little bit of a jitter that makes it really believable.
Yeah.
And the special effects team again, just did a pretty great job of mounting this fake head on a false neck, and then we see Tasso's hairy man hands with the ring come up and grab, and it's clearly not a woman's hands, but that's fine. I mean, I kind of love that.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty spectacular end for this villain.
I'd have to imagine that this was a pretty big deal when it came out. Like seeing someone's head chop off. Like I can't think of a lot of truly graphic killings like that. I mean, you probably see some comical ones where it's a movie in medieval times and someone has a guillotine and it's from a distance and you see like a little melon fall off or something, but like this was like close up, slow motion, pretty graphic and gory, and they're really focusing a lot of attention on like, hey, this woman just had her head cut off and we're gonna let you see every single detail of it.
Yeah. And I would have loved to see what the reaction was in the theater. Was it a scream of horror because it's another gory death? Or was it more like the cheer when Jaws is exploded by the scuba tank? People are seeing this villain get what she deserves and just like hooting and hollering, or what was the reaction? It had to be a thunderous response.
Yeah, or were there ever any like overprotective moms that were perhaps rooting for Mrs. Voorhees to win? Like, yeah, I totally understand. I would do the same thing for my child.
Right.
And, disappointed that Alice ends up winning. But yeah, I wonder if there were. I bet it would be a mix of, people gasping at the horror of what happened and then some people cheering like, yeah, fuck you, Mrs. Voorhees. Yeah, Alice, you rock. And
very cathartic.
Yeah.
End to the killings. So yeah, we say goodbye to Pamela Voorhees. So we can also talk a little bit about Ms. Betsy Palmer. Yeah, I mean she's actually, to my surprise, and nothing against her or her career, but she's actually a little bit of a household name. Both of my parents knew who she was, and certainly not because of Friday the 13th. Although they, like, oh, Betsy Palmer wound up in a Friday the 13th movie, haha. But yeah, I mean, when she passed away in 2015, my folks responded to her as someone they had kind of known all along in the entertainment industry, and I think that she did a stint on Knots Landing, which I know my mom watched back in the day. And she was on some things and in some movies and stuff before Friday the 13th that I think, she had enough of a career that my folks knew who she was. And that says something, because my folks don't know a lot of Hollywood stuff and don't know a lot of trivia. So,
Well, I read that she also dated James Dean at one point.
Oh, wow.
And so you'd have to think that she was probably in a pretty cool circle back
Yeah.
in the day.
yeah.
I obviously was not very familiar with her prior to this, but yeah, she's got a pretty substantial track record before she did this role. She was 53 when she filmed this movie, and at least to me, she looks a lot older than 53, and that could just be makeup and the way she's lit and everything. But I remember, when I was watching this movie as a kid, thinking that she did look like an older woman. But when I found out that she was only 53, 10 years older than I am now, I'm like, oh my God, she's really not that old.
Yeah, no, I mean, she's on the younger side of middle age, frankly. But yeah, she was pretty tough in this movie, and good for her for doing it. And I think that she probably, I think she's on record as saying she never thought it would go anywhere. But
yeah, I think she described the script for Friday the 13th as a piece of shit. And the only reason she claims the only reason why she took the role was because she wanted to get a new car.
Oh, that's right.
And this was going to get her about $10,000 or something, which was going to cover the cost of her new car. And so she's like, why the hell not? And so she did it despite the fact that she thought it was a shitty script, and did her little role and bought her new car.
And I mean, I don't get the sense that she ever disavowed it after the fact either. I mean, she showed up in plenty of interviews, and
Yep.
and I believe probably even did some conventions.
Oh,
and
I would
stuff,
imagine, yeah.
and seemed to treat fans kindly. So that's cool that she
Yep.
that she stuck with it. So Alice has survived Pam's rampage, and takes solace by paddling out to the middle of the lake in her canoe.
Doing what you suggested
I
in the first
suggested.
place, which I can, in the heat of the battle, I can kind of understand why you'd want to get into a canoe and go away. At the conclusion of the battle, I have no idea why you'd want to get in the kayak and paddle out in the middle of the lake.
Agreed. At this point, I would, having just decapitated someone, I would hold off the PTSD a little longer and go haul Annie's body out of the Jeep and hop in
Exactly.
and get the fuck out of town.
Maybe turn the generator on one last time.
Maybe go
just,
fiddle with good idea. Go fiddle with the generator a little bit. But she instead decides to go paddle out into the lake where, as the sun rises, is basically just enjoying a tranquil moment of safety.
It's an impressive shot. I love this.
It's
It's just
gorgeous.
it's just perfect. The lake is just like a mirror or a crystal, if you will. And it's it's just completely flat, and it's fall, which defies the logic of a summer camp, but we'll look past that. But she's just kind of like peacefully floating in this lake, and it's the sun is rising, and there's this just real great sense of calm, and they linger on this shot for a while, but I don't mind it because it looks so great.
Yeah, I always enjoy these moments, and even the music it feels like Mr. Mom theme or something in the background. It's pretty dated, but fits the scene nicely, and we see the police arrive and begin calling to her from the shore. So
this time it's the formidable team of Sergeant Tierney and Officer Dorff.
So good. We've
got shit's
Dorff
gonna
and
get
Tierney
done.
are on the case.
Yep.
Sunday nights on NBC.
Yeah, nice of them to show up hours later.
But that means that help has arrived. So the worst is over. Alice can rest easy.
Yeah, I mean, everything is going to be okay. I mean, what is possibly going to happen to her? She's out in the lake, and it's clear that Mrs. Voorhees is dead. The busboy probably witnessed this and just bolted out of there just before he got caught, so we don't have to worry about him anymore. So he's good. I mean, she's fine, and I think.
Oh my God! Jason just popped out of the lake.
Yeah. Then that happens. It's the same boy that we've seen in Mrs. Voorhees' dreams.
Yeah.
Which would suggest that her interpretation of what Jason looks like is accurate, because it's the same exact boy that comes out of the lake and grabs
Yeah,
Alice.
he's a little mossier than we saw him in the flashbacks.
Yeah.
But yeah, he clearly hasn't aged, unless he was this like withered little homunculus floating under the surface of the water. But he still looks like he's a little boy.
Yeah, which is strange, because this is we had alluded to the timeline in an earlier episode, how things may or may not necessarily line up. And so Jason allegedly drowned in 1957, and here we are, and it's 1979 at least,
right.
And it's still a boy.
And I based on his appearance in the flashbacks, I was estimating that he was about 11 years old or something.
Yeah.
And that would mean he was born in 1946 and would be 34 years old when he jumps out of the lake to grab Alice.
And this is definitely not a 34-year-old man jumping out of a lake.
34-year-old man. And as an aside, he would be 72 years old at the time of this recording, which is not too far from the age of our fathers.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's a little bit of a puzzle as to what's going on here. But then Alice wakes up.
Yeah, we don't see anything after that. She gets dragged into the lake.
Yeah, the canoe is tipped over.
Yeah,
and then
the boy, has his arms around her neck. She screams. There's, horrifying music. She gets pulled under the lake. We don't even see a reaction shot from Tierney and Dorff. They're probably not even paying attention anyway. They're probably looking at the decapitated body on the shore and going, "Ew, this is gross." And Dorff's probably trying to figure out how to start the motorcycle or something. But yeah, it just kind of like fades away, and next thing we know, we cut to Alice in a hospital bed, and there's some like doctors and nurses standing around her, and they're just kind of calming her down. They're like, it's over, you got nothing to worry about, you're good.
Yeah, so she is now safe in the hospital, and that's where we leave her this time.
Yeah.
Obviously the deaths in this episode, we've confirmed the end of Steve Christie.
Yep.
And the spectacular demise of Pamela Voorhees by decapitation via machete.
So this is a pretty uneventful episode.
Yeah, you can really skip this whole chunk of the movie. It's not very important.
Not a lot happens, and you'd be fine, ending the movie, 13 minutes before this, and you kind of get the gist of it. Yeah. But yeah, so Alice is in a hospital bed, and we still got a little bit of time left, so maybe even enough time for Jason to make an appearance at the hospital, or even Mrs. Voorhees.
The doctor pulls off his mask, and it's Jason.
Right, or maybe they are attempting to reattach Mrs. Voorhees' head in the bed next to her. I don't know. We haven't gotten there yet.
Maybe Mrs. Voorhees is under the hospital bed, and a plaid arm will reach up.
It's possible. All I know is that it just can't. I don't necessarily trust the doctors right now when they're saying that it's over. So we'll just have to wait and see. But that pretty much wraps up this episode, unless you've got anything else.
Nope, that's it.
So thanks again for joining us. I'm Brian.
I'm Greg.
And you are all doomed.